The Sunday school lesson for September 15th, 2024 is it inevitable? 2 Kings chapter 19, verses 14 through 20, and verses 29 through 31. Welcome, viewers and subscribers, to my channel, The Backstory and More. I am Audrey. If you are interested in knowing what happens before each Sunday school lesson, you are at the right place because I will share the backstory, read the lesson text, and offer a brief lesson summary. The backstory takes us to 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 7b through chapter 19, verse 13. Ahaz made a costly treaty with Assyria, having to pay taxes to them. But Hezekiah refused to pay. When Israel failed, Assyria set its sight on Judah and attacked and conquered many cities. When the Assyrians marched toward Jerusalem, King Hezekiah shut off the springs outside the city walls, stockpiled weapons, and prepared for a siege. 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 2 through 5. When Hezekiah saw what the Assyrian army was doing to the country, he apparently had second thoughts about the rebellion and sent a message of apology for refusing to pay the tribute, and he offered to make it up. The Assyrian king demanded such a large payment that Hezekiah was forced to use the temple and palace treasures, even stripping the gold from the temple doors and doorposts. Not appeased by the tribute, the Assyrian king sent representatives with a message filled with intimidation and threats. The king's spokesman asked why the Jews thought they could be so confident. The Lord was not on their side, the Assyrians insisted. Even if he were, the Assyrians continued, the Lord could no more help Jerusalem than the gods of other conquered countries had been able to help those people. Then the spokesman called out to all the people to surrender and stop following Hezekiah and his God, who would not be able to save them. When Hezekiah heard the king's message, he tore his clothes in grief, went into the temple to pray, and sent his men to the prophet Isaiah to ask him to pray for the remnant that still survives. Isaiah reassured the king by telling him that the king would himself move against the Assyrians, causing the Assyrian king to return home, where he would be killed with a sword. Isaiah 37. Meanwhile, the Assyrians, who were also battling on other fronts, received word that the king of Cush was coming against them. This was the region up the Nile just south of Egypt. Kings of Cush were ruling Egypt at that time. Apparently, King Sennacherib of Assyria gathered his forces to meet this new danger, but he sent a letter to Hezekiah, repeating the threat against Jerusalem and telling again why he thought Hezekiah ought to give up. The backstory ends here, and today's lesson continues with the next frame. Verses 14 through 15. Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers and read it. Then he went up to the temple of the Lord and spread it out before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Verses 16 through 17. Give ear, Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, Lord, and see. Listen to the words Sennacherib has sent to ridicule the living God. It is true, Lord, that the Assyrian kings have laid waste these nations and their lands. Verses 18 through 19. They have thrown their gods into the fire and destroyed them, for they were not gods, but only wood and stone, fashioned by human hands. Now, Lord our God, deliver us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, Lord, are God. Verse 20. Then Isaiah, son of Amoz, sent a message to Hezekiah. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I have heard your prayer concerning Sennacherib, king of Assyria. Verse 29. This will be the sign for you, Hezekiah. This year you will eat what grows by itself, and the second year what springs from that. But in the third year sow and reap, plant vineyards and eat their fruit. Verses 30 through 31. Once more a remnant of the kingdom of Judah will take root below and bear fruit above. For out of Jerusalem will come a remnant, and out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. A brief summary. When Hezekiah read the letter, he went to the temple and spread it out before the Lord, signifying Hezekiah's reliance on God. Judah's army was no match for the huge forces of Assyria. He began to pray, beginning with an acknowledgement of who God is. He understood that Jehovah was not only Lord, the God of Israel, but also the only real God over all the kingdoms of the earth. He had made heaven and earth. The Assyrian armies were a part of his creation, and he could control them. Then Hezekiah begged the Lord to take both look and listen, that is, to give full attention to the words Sennacherib had sent to ridicule the living God by declaring that God could no more save Judah than the imaginary gods of other countries could save those nations. Verses 10 through 13. Sennacherib boasted that Assyrian kings had captured many cities. Chapter 18, verse 33, verse 34, and chapter 19, verse 12 and verse 13, and had destroyed the so-called gods of other nations. Since those gods had not saved their people, could the Lord be expected to save his people? Hezekiah had a clearer understanding. He knew the destroyed gods were only wood and stone images carved by men. The Lord was not made by men. Instead, he made men and everything else in the earth and sky. So Hezekiah begged the Lord to deliver them, but not for their sake alone. A decisive victory over the mighty Assyrians would bring honor to God and would let everyone know that Jehovah was not like the powerless idols worshipped in pagan nations. After Hezekiah's prayer, the Lord sent him a message through Isaiah. I have heard, which implied that God not only received Hezekiah's prayer, but would give a favorable answer. Then Isaiah spoke the Lord's word to the Assyrians. Jerusalem despises you and mocks you. Who is it you have ridiculed and blasphemed? The Lord controls what happens in the world, and because of their haughtiness against him, he will send them back the way they came. Then Isaiah told Hezekiah that his people would have to live for a while on what grows by itself. But after that, they would again plant and harvest, and the remnant of Jerusalem would prosper in the land. Jerusalem was safe from any attack. Thank you so very much for watching and listening. And please remember that every Sunday at 1 o'clock Central Standard Time, I release a new video for the upcoming Sunday school lesson. Stay safe, and thank you so very much for helping this channel to grow one viewer and one subscriber at a time.